the work done must be judged basis the merit of the person, not the gender.
The better performing states in population control ended up being penalized by having lesser representation in the Lok Sabha.
It was observed that the access to toilets, especially for girls in schools, is not present.
We should also see that there is an India that is changing today.
Rwanda has a representation of 61.3% of women. Let's take a look at our neighboring countries, and we observe that in Pakistan, the numbers and the percentage stands at 20.2%, and in a country like Saudi Arabia, it is 19.9%.
There is a renewed emphasis on higher education for women.
That is because there are so many issues which we as women face in the life today. That kind of discrimination should not be faced by anybody. Yatra naryastu pujyante, ramante tatra devataha, yatra etastu na pujyante, sarvasta trafalah kriyaha. Welcome one and all to the podcast on the challenges to the implementation of the Women's Reservation Bill. I am Dr. Anjali Sane, Dean, School of Economics, Commerce and Public Policy at MIT World Peace University. As we approach 8th March, the International Women's Day, it is my pleasure to welcome one and all to this podcast. Today, we are joined by Professor Sridhar Pabbisetti, the Senior Director at MIT School of Government. The Women's Reservation Bill was passed on the 20th of September 2023. Till now, Bharat has one female Prime Minister, 2 presidents who were females, 15 chief ministers who were females, as compared to 360 male chief ministers. Against this backdrop, the Women's Reservation Act of 2023 or the Constitution 106th Amendment Act 2023 reserves 1/3 of all seats for women in the Lok Sabha, state legislature assemblies and the Legislative Assembly of the National Capital Territory of Delhi, including those reserved for SCs and STs. The reservation will be effective after the publication of the census conducted following the Act's commencement and endures for a 15-year period with potential extension determined by parliamentary action. The rotation of seats allocated for women will be governed by parliamentary legislation after each delimitation process. Currently, in Bharat, around 15% of the total members of the 17th Lok Sabha are women, while in the state legislative assemblies, women on average constitute 9% of the total members. If we compare this with the statistics of other countries, Rwanda has a representation of 61.3% of women. Cuba stands second in the list with 53.2%, and Bolivia is third in the list with 53.1%. Let's take a look at our neighboring countries, and we observe that in Pakistan, the numbers and the percentage stands at 20.2%, and in a country like Saudi Arabia, it is 19.9%. Against this backdrop, it is my pleasure to welcome one and all to this podcast, where we are going to discuss the various challenges faced in the implementation of the Women's Reservation Bill. Professor Sridhar, it is my pleasure to welcome you, and I'll start with my first question, which is a very basic question. Sir, in 2029 elections, there will be a total of 753 members of parliament. Can you please elaborate exactly what do we mean by this delimitation process?
Good morning, Dr. Anjali Sane, and let me start by wishing you a very happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, sir.
We should first begin by understanding the backdrop of the delimitation process. It begins by a simple diktat saying that one citizen, one vote, one value. However, a nation like India has a constant stream of migrations that are happening between rural to urban, cities to cities, and cities back to rural. This constant migration over a period of time will not keep any particular division of a constituency to have the same population over a period of time. The broad principle of one citizen, one vote, one value is achieved in Indian constitution through the process of delimitation. During delimitation, the total population of the country is divided by the number of seats and thereby the boundaries are drawn for the constituencies. In the year 1951, the total population of India was 36.1 crores. The number of constituencies was 494, and thereby you ended up getting a constituency that was delimited to have an average population of 7.3 lakhs. When it came to the year 1961, the population increased to 43.9 crores. The population per constituency ended up becoming 8.4 lakhs. When it came to the year 1971, the population per seat was 10.1 lakhs. There was an interesting phenomenon that was happening during this time. The population growth was not constant across the states of India. Now, how do you look at this? Population control was a desired goal for the country. We saw that some states started to do population control much better than the other states. When this difference came about, the better performing states in population control ended up being penalized by having lesser representation in the Lok Sabha. This challenge was acknowledged by the government of India and the parliament, and they decided to postpone the delimitation exercise by 25 years, right? And that is the reason why there has been no delimitation after the 1971 census. Okay. The 1971 census continues to be the benchmark where population growth rates were more or less the same, and hence that is what we are following now. But the population growth over the since 1971 has been very different for different parts of the state. Now the time has come where we are seeing little bit of moderation of the population, and hence we are now embarking on the new census becoming the benchmark for the delimitation exercise. Okay. And now that we know that there are going to be a large number of population and also the need to accommodate more women, we are now coming up with 753 MPs to represent the entire populace of our country. Okay. So that is the delimitation process, right, of how first of all you come up with a number roughly to define the constituency boundary, and then you go about drawing contiguous boundaries. That is the process of delimitation.
You spoke about equal value. Now, against that backdrop, I would like to ask you that with all these debates going on about reservation and so on, the contention is always affirmative action, representation versus the loss of merit. So, it is merit versus affirmative action. Can you please elaborate or explain your views on this statement?
So, let us look at what are the principles that can govern our electoral processes. We know for sure that in our country, the number of women in our population would be close to half of it, or that is a desirable goal. And if that is the case, what should be the ideal representation for women in our various legislative bodies? When we did the Panchayati Raj Act as well as the 74th Amendment for Nagarpalika, the desire was to have more and more women representation, and hence there was provision of having up to 50% women representation in these bodies. However, the same was not enforced in our assemblies and the parliamentary election. What was the understanding at that point of time? We believed that there will be a bubbling up of political representation. We have not seen that happen. So, there remains a fundamental challenge in how much we are enabling our women to come and take leadership position in our electoral processes. Of what has been 33 to 50% of women representation at the local institution has only translated to about 9% women representation at the state assemblies. Correct. And less than 15% representation at the Lok Sabha. Correct. Now, this is something for all of us to take a note of and then see what can be the next step. And that is the reason in the wisdom today the parliament has passed that 1/3 could be reservation. It is not one half, which is actually the natural population representation that is available for women. However, not mandating and taking away the space for merit, it was decided that it will go up to 1/3 of those constituencies. If you remember, this women reservation bill has been languishing for close to 2.5 decades.
True.
And the battle has been on and off going on. And I was involved very closely to work with various members of parliament in the year 2012. When we interacted with so many of them, the first fundamental challenge was there are only 545 seats or 543 seats. Do you intend to say that many men MPs will disenfranchise themselves and not be available for next re-election because of this women reservation bill? Because at that point the formulation was the existing seats would get converted to reserved seat. Correct. But today we have the luxury. The 543 is becoming 753, and thereby you have headroom wherein the meritocracy without being affected, you have the extra seats being able to come in and make it easy for a smooth transition of political franchise. So, I think many things have come together in making this happen, and I think it is a welcome move for us to get into 753 members of parliament, of which 1/3 will be women. And I think time has come for India, as it takes leadership at the global stage, to also celebrate womenhood and have at least 1/3 of them in the parliament. And as you would imagine, this 1/3 is not an upper limit. Right? Women will be able to freely contest in other seats as well. I think over a period of time we will tend to get to the natural equilibrium, which is better than 9% and 15%, which I believe is desirable for everyone.
So I fully agree with you that we are increasing the number of MPs from the current number to 753 MPs. Statistically sounds very good, but as I mentioned in my introduction as well, that this bill stands valid for a 15-year period, right? Statistically correct, 15-year period correct, but then over these 15 years, what do you foresee will be the challenges in the actual implementation of the Women's Reservation Bill? Do you think that it will actually bring about a change in the mentality of the people, or how would they foresee their leader as a woman, or will it be only that the woman is a leader for namesake, with actually the sarpanch pati or the neta pati we actually doing the role on the ground, with the woman being just the face of the constituency? So please, what are your views on this?
Yes, the sarpanch pati phenomenon is very well known. Yes. And widely reported in the media as well. We should also see that there is a India that is changing today. There is a renewed emphasis on higher education for women. Today we have various government initiatives like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. This has helped in lot more women taking a central position in the education, as well as looking at various opportunities than ever before. And I am sure this political struggle also will change, right. I remember a quote by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, wherein he mentioned that education is like the milk of tigress, and once you have taken a sip of it, you will no longer remain the same. You see that today there is a whole lot of greater space being made available for women in India today, be it in terms of higher educational institution and the access that women have, or be it in our own corporate boards. Today women are being mandated through legislation to be available in all these decision making processes. And hence, I do not see the women of yesterday to be the women of tomorrow. And this 15-year period is for all of us to work together and enable the women leaders who want to come forward to be rightfully representative of their constituencies and not of their fathers-in-law, husbands, or their son-in-laws, right. And I think that is the right representation for us to look at. This is not going to be easy, but the more and more all of us get involved, the more and more all of us have a positive attitude towards politics, towards the government processes, we will make it respectable for women to get into politics, right. No matter which women leader you see, I remember one of my student 6 years ago when she was interacting with Sushma Swaraj, she was saying that you guys should think a lot before you commit yourself to a life of as women to come into public life. I'm sure she would say it differently today, right? She herself having represented India in various fora and also having seen the face of women, I'm sure she would be far more spirited when she would look at this issue. So that's one fundamental challenge that is not easy solution, but all of us can put our minds together and solve it in the next 15 years. The second issue comes about the knowledge and skill, and probably this is something that we can delve into a little deeper later. But I would say that more and more opportunities today exist for people who want to get into politics to empower themselves with the right skills, with the right set of thinking to come and emerge successfully in the field of politics. Now, let me flip the question to you, Dr. Anjali Sane. Having more women MPs will mean more women related issues or diverse perspectives on other issues also when discussed, we should be enriched by the perspectives of what women feel. What do you foresee will be the changed discussions that will happen henceforth in the parliament and the state assemblies?
As a woman leader or as a representative, I would say that I have a lot of hopes when and if and when this women's reservation bill is actually seen being implemented. That is because there are so many issues which we as women face in the life today, which sometimes go unnoticed is what I feel. And the intensity of the issue is many times not felt by our counterparts is what I understand or what I perceive. The one thing which I would like to mention here is one issue which I would like the MPs to discuss is full gender equality, sir. Which means that not just in terms of education or this, but gender equality in the fullest sense of it. We have to realize that men and women are physically never going to be equal to each other. But the access to opportunities in various fields should be given equally to both, not just basis the gender of that person. As an economist, me being a student of economics, I would say the issue which I would like to be discussed is the gender pay gap. Today, the current estimation is it's around 24.1%, which means that men are getting paid more than women for the same amount of work being done. I would somewhere like this gap to decrease. There should not be a gap in the wages basis the gender of that person. Agreed that the work performed, especially the physical work, I would say, I am not comparing that at all. But when it comes to the intellectual work or when it comes to theatrical work, when it comes to literary work, then the gender pay gap should not be present. So that is one issue which I would like the future MPs, women MPs especially, to raise in the parliament. Next, sir, one issue which I am very closely associated and where the School of Economics and Public Policy are working on is access to sanitation. At MIT World Peace University, one very intrinsic activity that we conduct is the rural immersion program. Today, as we speak, around 34 of my students have gone to a nearby village for the rural immersion program. And when I went there for a recce, it was observed that the access to toilets, especially for girls in schools, is not present. So the women have a lot of problem, especially when they have to go to fields during daytime, and that is a problem because the privacy is disturbed and they feel very awkward. So the access to sanitation is something which I am very deeply associated with, and as a school we are working on this area as well. So where the public health as well as access to sanitary facilities will be given to women, not just in cities. I mean, I am not even talking about urban areas like Pune, Mumbai or Delhi, Bangalore, but across all levels, even in the villages, this facility must be made available because it is a basic right that women deserve. And finally, sir, though we do say that there is no discrimination at workplace, it is observed that women do face discrimination. And somewhere, though not openly today, even in cities, they are facing violence. Not just on the roads, not just on the streets outside, but a silent type of violation, a silent type of violence even in the households. I would like somewhere the women MPs to raise this issue about protecting the women not just from violence on the roads outside, on the streets outside, but also from within, as well as the discrimination which they face. That she has done this well because she is a woman, or she hasn't done this well, or she is a woman. That kind of discrimination should not be faced by anybody for that matter. The work done must be judged basis the merit of the person, not the gender of the person. These are just some of the issues which I have thought of. There could be many more, and I do agree that the 15-year period I am hoping will be a platform that we as women get to put forth our voice in front of the entire nation. And as is rightly said, the nation wants to know. So we would like to know what our MPs feel about that as well.
Very rightfully so. Just I would like to add a pointer. As we speak, the students of the School of Government are today doing a field visit where they would be experimenting with participatory research methods, and they would try to elicit what are the demands, what are the needs of people from ground up. I think methods like these, instruments like these should be employed more and more by the women MPs to discover issues from ground up and also their own lived experiences. If they can marry these both, then surely the quality of debate will go up. I was recently talking to a Norwegian minister, and she was telling me that, Sridhar, we have a very strict rule when we offer our services as to mediate and get people on the negotiating table. The rule that we never violate is that unless the conflicting parties have women representatives along with them, we don't begin the negotiation. And I think it's this implicit acknowledgement telling that the women being on the table is a good starting point for us to start fixing many of these gaps which are not well represented. I hope we will find the solutions for all the points that you raised in the next 15 years.
Professor Sridhar, in the current scenario in the economy of Bharat, how do you perceive the diversity that we are experiencing in the women's group? As a group, I'm not even taking the age or the regional bias in mind, but as a group, how do you perceive the diversities amongst the women as a homogeneous group?
One of the first things that we need to look at is access to education. Not all women have the same access to education.
True.
The second challenge that we should also look at is the social access or social hierarchy where they belong to. Caste, religion, sexual orientation are all three different parameters that could kind of either keep them behind or ahead of being able to realize the opportunities around them. The third important thing is the political access itself, right? We have seen in India there is a heavy, there is a lot of family influence that exists in politics. True. Neta ka beta neta, neta ka beti neta, and all of these things, right? That is also a third biggest problem that exists when we look at women as a group. I think if we are conscious about all these three things, if we kind of continuously sensitize the people and kind of say these are the three important parameters for you to evaluate your own candidates when they come to represent you, then I think a great change is possible today. First generation learners, people from backward castes or religion, minority religion, can always kind of find it very intimidating to kind of contest, come forward and contest. But the more and more we as a nation start debating about these issues and then take a point of view about these things, I am sure the women representation will cater to all constituencies over a period of time.
I feel that is where the role of an institute like School of Public Policy or the MIT School of Government becomes even more important, where we are not just creating the academicians of tomorrow, but we are creating the leaders of the nation. in the realm of government, administration and public policy. And since we are in academics, both of us are experiencing that the number of girls coming, or the number of girls, the gross enrollment ratio, I would say, is seeing an upward trend. Do you foresee that the women MPs will become role model for our girls?
Absolutely. I remember this hair raising experience I had 2 decades ago. I was in remote Andhra Pradesh. I had gone there for my cousin's wedding. This was the election season.
Okay.
And I stopped by a shack in a remote village shanty, and there was this old lady who was running the shack. We bought something to eat, and then I asked that old lady, whom will you vote when this election comes up? And she said, I will vote for Indira Gandhi. Well, Indira Gandhi was dead and gone for a long period of time. But seeing women in positions of leadership will actually tell the girls, will actually help the girls to visualize themselves being there. If there have been no role model like Indira Gandhi, Sushma Swaraj, or even Sumitra Mahajan and others, the girls do not have a role model to look up to. It was just last week that Sumitra Mahajan ji made a visit to interact with the campus, and also interacted with the School of Government students, and that itself was a very wonderful experience our students cherish, of seeing how a woman gracefully, Sumitra Mahajan is not a very aggressive person, but she is a very assertive person, right? How she can gracefully bring about the change that she is articulating for, and hence that gives them a lived experience of aspiring to be like her. Our whole curriculum is based on experiential learning, where we get our students to go meet and interact with leaders across spectrum. Our students not only meet leaders like Fali Nariman, we had the privilege of meeting him a week before his death on February 13th, and they inspire them to no end. Then the next day they were able to go meet Srimati Nirmala Sitharamanji and learn from her what is her prescription for the Indian economic challenges, right? Here is a leader who has led both the defense ministry as well as the finance ministry, right? So these experiences is what our girl students are immensely inspired for. And that's the reason I'm very, very confident that these women leaders in the past continue to showcase their inspiration to all the girls. And I'm sure with more and more women MPs being there, more and more women MLAs being there, reservation being there, we surely are going to see a lot more women leaders come forth and take greater center stage. And that's a beautiful thing for India to experience and India to cherish. In the world of democratic progress, we are a very young nation. It's only 7.5 decades that we have been an independent republic. With the passing of the Women Reservation Bill in India, it's going to open up a whole world of opportunities for more and more women to come into the world of politics, take the center stage, present their viewpoints and set the agenda for the future governance of our country. We have made a great start as a democratic nation, but there is still a lot more for us to achieve, where the gender of the person doesn't determine the success the person can realize in their own lifetime. After all, half the sky belongs to the women.
Thank you, Professor Sridhar. As is rightly said, education is the passport for the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Against this backdrop, it was a pleasure having Professor Sridhar Pabisetti from MIT School of Government for this podcast.
Thank you.
Challenging times lie ahead for all of us in terms of the Women's Reservation Bill. But there is a silver lining to the dark cloud. I am hopeful that with this reservation and representation from all strata of the society, the Women's Reservation Bill will provide a platform for us women to be heard in the Parliament, for our issues to be raised in the Parliament, and maybe not immediately, but over the long run, we hope that Bharat will become a better place for women to live in, to learn and to grow. Thank you all for joining us today for this podcast.